It's important not to idolize or to demonize anyone, but rather to let them be who and what they truly are, no more, no less. I went to the States in the early 1990s, 4 times with Fukushima Roshi as his assistant interpreter. The first time I went, it was amazing to be with him morning, noon, and night off in an adjoining hotel room. Because up until then, I had had some social events where I was with him as interpreter or just as one of his disciples. But usually, day to day, I saw him for 30 seconds or so in the doksan, and the one-on-one, sometimes several times a day, but that was pretty much it. And I was pretty sure that, unlike many others, I was not idolizing my master. However, the second year and the third year, I went to the States and acted as his assistant and interpreter. I started to hear those same stories over and over again and wondered why he wasn't being more creative, responding to the moment. And I started to see he had likes and dislikes. In a word, I started to see my Zen master as a human being. I didn't realize how I had been putting him up on a pedestal, as we say, idolizing him. I also had the good fortune to work for 34 years at Hanazono University, which is a Rinzai Zen university. So I got to know and work with many Zen masters who were also teaching and working there. And this was also a precious opportunity because you could see how naturally, if you are studying with one Zen master, you tend to idolize them, to absolutize them. This is what enlightenment, awakening must look like. And perhaps unconsciously we may try to be like them, to imitate them. At Hanazono University, I didn't have that luxury because here I was sometimes with 4 or 5 Zen masters in a meeting where they were arguing about something, getting angry, misunderstanding, perhaps being very human. But also, they had different personalities. They weren't all alike. They weren't Zen master automatons or computers. They had their own personality. Not ego, but they had their own personality. Naturally, Fukushima Roshi did too. And I had to struggle with that for a few years as he fell down from his pedestal that I had put him up there. It's interesting because he never did anything to change one way or the other. But I realized I had to do that work. I had to let him be who he truly was. No more and no less. And when I did that, it was almost like a wall between us dissolved. And again, he didn't do anything one way or the other, but I had some work to do. So it is important not to idolize, needless to say, not to demonize either, anyone, but to see them for who they truly are. To, as I mentioned before, slander the teacher. Remember in that koan about that tree in the garden, and then later one of Joshu's great disciples, Kakuteshi, as is said in Japanese, he said, "My master had no such koan. He never said such a thing. Please don't slander him. Don't speak ill of him." But what I'm describing now is perhaps just the surface of that koan, but it's a valuable surface for us to consider now. Do we slander when we idolize or when we demonize? When we turn this into something, anything? Roshi, in his own way, Fukushima Roshi, as he grew older, he realized, largely in contact with the American Zen scene and problems that are there, that from now, Zen in the modern world, if I put it that way, will naturally be a lay Zen, as he himself said, both in speech and in writing. American Zen, we might say Western Zen, but he had never been to Europe. He had only been to America. So he said American Zen has naturally learned much from the Japanese Rinzai tradition. But it is now time for American Zen, again, Western Zen, we might say, Zen in the modern world, to stand on its own. And this will naturally be, again, as Fukushima Roshi made clear, a lay Zen, not a monastic Zen. Rather than to try and imitate some tradition that is perhaps half understood. It's better to dig deep in our own well, so to speak, to dig deep under our own feet and find the precious treasure, because if we don't find it there, we're certainly not going to find it in some exotic koan. This is what Fukushima Roshi made clear in his own way over the years, over the decades, working through this complex koan curriculum, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of koans, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of capping phrases to attach to them, to bring it to life here and now through that tradition. That is what we must now do. That is what we are now doing. Fukushima Roshi, it's been 10 years now since you passed on. Tell me, where are you residing now? Where are you now? I'm in the deepest, darkest hell. But you're an enlightened Zen master. Why would you go to the deepest, darkest hell? That is what we now, for the rest of our lives, must answer with our lives. In this way, we truly pay tribute, honor the memory, not just honor the memory, but bring this spirit to life as we must. If anyone has a question or comment, please feel free to speak up. Thank you all for listening so intently over these several days. It's been wonderful, a great honor practicing together and bringing this memorial to life. Pia, as the host, would you like to say a word?
To ask you about the legacy of Roshi Fukushima, to ask, and I think you answered it really well. So exactly, you really said exactly how it is, and that this is his legacy, to bring it to life. And he actually was here during the last sitting. He was very present. So he's alive.
Thank you so much for hosting this, for making this all possible. We spoke this morning about ki-ichi, the calligraphy you have up on the wall, which is literally returning to one. There's a very famous koan I'm sure you're familiar with. All things return to one. To where does the one return? And as you know, the traditional famous Zen response is, I want to go to Linz to see the art restored by Pia. I believe that's the way that it's written up in the koan.
Probably. Sounds very much like it.
Would anyone else like to speak up? Please feel free.